Hello, welcome to another English sparkling wine with Tweedy video. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? This is one of the latest releases, the 2018 vintages from Breaky Bottom. This is their Cuve Brian James, and it's the wine that is made entirely with Sauvignon Blanc. Peter Hall, the winemaker, owner at Breaky Bottom, makes some of his wines with Sauvignon Blanc, some with the traditional champagne varieties, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. I'm particularly excited about this because I helped to harvest this vintage. I was there in, I think it was October 2018, picking these grapes that went into the press and made this wine, and I've been waiting 5 and a bit years to try it, so I'm really excited to open this up and see what it is like. I'll talk a bit more about the fun of harvesting, the experience, what it was like, but why don't I do that with a glass of the actual wine in hand. I should probably have used better stemware. I will try this again later at home, and I'll have my non-park stemware. This is Triton. Okay, so 2018 was this bumper vintage for most of England's wine producers. I think it was Peter at Breaky Bottom's best harvest to date, and I'm still not sure that has been bettered yet. We're in 2023 now. On the nose, starting with perhaps sort of classic Sauvignon Blanc, kind of grassy, herbaceous sort of notes. Something slightly in the citrus family, but not just straightforward lemon. Perhaps a little bit veering more towards lime, I think. Very fresh on the palate. It's hard to believe this has probably spent 4 years lees aging and some time under cork as well. Really zingy, really fresh, really lively. Again, I'm thinking more sort of lime rather than lemon. Has that slight kind of bitter edge to it. Has a really nice texture, very long, lingering finish. Still tasting it. Still tasting it. Yep, still there. Yep, mouth-watering, great stuff, and it will develop with time as well. I think, as I said, this was an abundant harvest, so there's going to be a lot of this 2018 vintage Breaky Bottom for years to come to enjoy. It's almost a slight hint of something spicy in there, which is something I've never experienced in an English sparkling or any sparkling wine before. I wonder if that's perhaps just my taste buds getting confused with that sort of limey, zingy limey note, and they're telling me I'm having Mexican food. This would probably be a great pairing with Mexican food, I think. Really fresh, really zingy. The harvest was a really fun experience. Hard work. I only did the morning shift, so about 4 hours of labour, so I'm a bit of a wimp in that regard. It was a great experience. Some surprising things that I learnt about the winemaking process. First of all, earwigs stand out in my memory. I don't know if this is a peculiarity of Breaky Bottom Vineyard, but the grapes were, I wouldn't say covered in earwigs, but every time I snipped off a bunch of grapes, there would quite often be an earwig in them. And by the time I had filled up a bucket, there were typically a dozen or more crawling around at the bottom. Also, potentially quite a dangerous job. The snips that they use, I think they call them snippers. They're not like ordinary garden secateurs. They don't have a curved blade. They're straight, completely straight blades. And they look a little bit more like scissors to me rather than secateurs, those conventional curved secateurs you might have in your garden. They are very sharp. And because it's a sort of long, slightly repetitive bit of manual labour, it's easy for your concentration to just wander off and start thinking about other things and then accidentally slice the end of your finger off. There were signs in the buckets saying, what is it, how did they phrase it? We're making white wine, not red wine. So please be really careful with the snips. There was at least one accident while I was there, and it was an old timer as well. It's somebody who had been going regularly to help out with the harvest for, as far as I understood, possibly a decade, but still had at some point become distracted and managed to snip the end of their finger off. Well, I mean, not, but they were bleeding profusely and had to go inside and get some first aid. I remember we were encouraged to work in pairs and sit opposite either side of a row of vines so that we could chat while we were working, and I think that's partly again because it's It is quite sort of repetitive manual labour, and it makes the whole thing a bit more fun if you have somebody to talk to while you're toiling away, assuming that that doesn't distract you and end up causing you to cut part of your finger off with the snips. It was a very vivid demonstration of that old saying, and also immortalised in the song, I heard it through the grapevine, that, you know, you can see very clearly it was a great demonstration of how people would turn to gossip to just pass the time, because it is a long, laborious task. I was particularly picking in this field where Peter has his Sèvres Blanc grapes. So, you know, I know very specifically, it's a very small vineyard. It's 6 acres or possibly even slightly less. And I think possibly half and half between the Champagne grapes and the Sèvres Blanc grapes. I'm not quite sure the split. So I can be reasonably sure in that small plot that grapes I would have picked during that day at Breaky Bottom will have ended up in some quantities or other in this glass. I'd say it's interesting that this has such zingy levels of acidity, considering that extreme level of ripeness from the grapes that year, that really hot summer. I think at one time I'd been to visit the vineyard earlier in the year, and I think there was some concern even in some parts of England that it might be too hot. You know, there might be drought and the vines might be struggling to get sufficient water, because you almost never water vines. They rely purely on rainfall, particularly where there are chalky soils. The water can be in reservoirs very deep underground, and the vines are pretty good at sort of searching down with their roots to find those reservoirs. So it is interesting that the resulting wine here is so zingy. It's a good thing. Nobody wants sickly sweet sparkling wine, do they? Acidity is really important in sparkling wine.